Imagine a time when North America was a vast, untamed wilderness, its towering forests stretching endlessly, its rivers wide and swift, cutting through uncharted lands. The air is thick with the scent of pine. The sounds of rushing water and rustling leaves fill the air. For hundreds of years, this land was a battleground, not between armies, but between ambitions. At the heart of this epic struggle, the humble beaver. This small, unassuming creature would drive a trade so vast that it would reshape the destiny of nations, communities, and the environment itself. The story of the North American fur trade begins in the 1500s. European sailors first arrived on these shores and encountered Native American tribes. They were in awe of the furs the tribes offered in exchange for European goods like knives, tools, and firearms. Among all the furs, none was more coveted than that of the beaver. In Europe, a fashion craze was sweeping through the continent: beaver hats. These hats weren't just accessories, they were status symbols. The fur was prized for its ability to be pressed into felt, making it durable and water-resistant. This demand sparked a gold rush of sorts, with everyone from trappers to merchants eager to cash in on the high value of beaver pelts. Imagine the excitement of early European traders, seeing these furs for the first time, knowing they held fortunes in their hands. But like all trends, fashion is fleeting. By the late 1700s and early 1800s, the beaver craze began to die down, replaced by lighter, cheaper silk hats, which were easier to mass-produce as Europe industrialized. Though the demand for beaver pelts diminished, the legacy of the fur trade had already been cemented. As the fur trade expanded, so too did the competition to control it. The Hudson Bay Company, established in 1670, quickly became the dominant force, holding vast territories under its control for over 2 centuries. But they weren't without rivals. The Northwest Company, formed by French traders like Pierre Esprit Radisson and Médard des Groseilliers, posed a serious challenge. The competition between these companies wasn't just about profits. It was about survival, power, and dominance in a hostile wilderness. The rivalry between these companies often erupted into violence. One of the most famous clashes came in 1816 at the Battle of Seven Oaks, a bloody confrontation between the Hudson's Bay Company and the Northwest Company over control of vital trade routes. Traders frequently sabotaged each other, sometimes destroying trading posts or cutting off supply lines. Both companies employed Native American tribes as allies, using diplomacy, alliances, and sometimes coercion to secure control of the land and fur resources. These fierce rivalries weren't just about pelts. They were about the control of vast territories that would later become Canada. The stakes were life and death, and in the remote wilderness, any advantage could mean the difference between survival and oblivion. At the heart of the fur trade were the Native American tribes, whose knowledge of the land and hunting skills were essential to the success of European traders. Tribes like the Huron, Iroquois, and Algonquin had long established networks for trading furs, and they were expert trappers. For many native communities, the fur trade wasn't just a transaction, it was a continuation of their traditions of gift-giving and diplomacy. Trading was deeply embedded in their cultural fabric. But these partnerships were fraught with tension. To Native Americans, the exchange of furs for European goods was not purely transactional. It involved complex social and diplomatic rituals. In contrast, European traders, driven by profits, often misunderstood these cultural nuances, leading to broken promises and exploitation. For many native tribes, firearms and metal tools became essential, and their dependence on European goods grew. As the fur trade pushed further west, Native American tribes found themselves increasingly displaced, their traditional lands lost to European settlers or the growing trade network. The balance of power began to shift, and over time, the very trade that had brought opportunity became a source of devastation. As demand for furs expanded, so too did the push into unexplored territory. Trappers and explorers moved deeper into the wilderness, following rivers like the St. Lawrence, the Mississippi, and the Missouri in search of new fur sources. Trading posts were established in remote locations like Quebec, St. Louis, and Fort Vancouver, becoming vital hubs of commerce. One of the most powerful figures of this westward expansion was John Jacob Astor, a German immigrant who built an empire with the American Fur Company. Astor's influence extended far beyond the wilderness. His success in the fur trade helped fuel the economic growth of cities like New York, where he invested heavily in real estate, becoming one of the first millionaires in American history. But the wilderness was unforgiving. Explorers and traders faced brutal winters, dangerous river crossings, and constant threats from rival companies and hostile tribes. Despite these dangers, the fur trade was a force of expansion, pushing European settlements further into the unknown. While the fur trade brought wealth and power to many, it also had devastating consequences. Beavers, once plentiful across North America, were hunted to near extinction. Entire ecosystems, dependent on beaver activity, began to collapse. Beavers were more than just a resource. They were ecosystem engineers. Their dams created wetlands that provided habitats for countless species of fish, birds, and plants. With the beavers gone, rivers once slowed by their dams began to erode, leading to the destruction of wetlands and a cascade of environmental damage. Fish populations suffered, and the landscape itself changed as the delicate balance of nature was disrupted. This overhunting and environmental destruction serve as an early lesson in the dangers of resource exploitation. The fur trade, which had once seemed limitless, ultimately led to the decline of not only the beaver, but also the very land on which the trade depended. By the mid-1800s, the fur trade that had once dominated the North American economy was fading. The rise of agriculture, mining, and railroads, coupled with changing fashions in Europe, shifted the economic focus away from fur. Companies like the Hudson Bay Company adapted by expanding their interests into retail and other industries, but the era of the fur trade was over. For the traders and trappers who had spent their lives in the wilderness, the end of the fur trade was the end of a way of life. Many struggled to adapt to the changing world, and for Native American tribes, the disappearance of the fur trade brought further challenges, as their lands were encroached upon and their partnerships with European traders dissolved. The North American fur trade wasn't just about beavers or business, it was about survival, ambition, and greed. It's a story of how a seemingly simple fashion craze could drive exploration, spark rivalries, build empires, and reshape an entire continent. But it's also a cautionary tale about the consequences of unchecked exploitation. The ecological damage wrought by the fur trade still serves as a warning for modern times, as we continue to grapple with the balance between resource use and sustainability. The lessons from the fur trade remind us that our choices, whether driven by profit or survival, have far-reaching consequences that shape the world for generations to come.